Test. At this time, I'd like to call the January 9th, 2023 Rockingham County School Board meeting to order. Welcome to you all. I hope and trust that everyone had a blessed Christmas and a joyous New Year. And we're pleased to have you with us this evening. The first item of business is we do need to approve tonight's agenda, and I will entertain a motion in that regard.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Lohr. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any questions, comments, or suggested additions? Hearing none. All in favor of approval of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that is 5-0. At this time, I ask if you would please, those who are able to stand, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we would ask that you would please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on our agenda is our annual organization, and begins with the election of the chair for 2023-24. And I would like to nominate Vice Chair Jackie Lohr to be chair for next year. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of Jackie Lohr as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That's 5-0. Congratulations, ma'am.
Congratulations, Ms. Lohr. And while you take your seats, I do want to make sure that Mr. Breeden receives recognition for his outstanding leadership and service to the students and staff of Rockingham County Public Schools. And in appreciation of that, we do have a present for you. So if I can bring that over to you. Congratulations and thank you for everything you've done.
I'd like to reiterate that. Thank you, former chairman, Mr. Breeden. And thank you to all of you all for trusting me with the leadership role for the coming year. I hope that we can all work together to do just amazingly great things for kids in Rockingham County. So thank you. We now need to elect a vice chair. I will entertain nominations for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Charlotte McQuilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Do I hear a second? Great. Thank you, Mr. Cross. We have a nomination that's been properly made and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll move on. Is there any further discussion?
I want to personally thank you, Charlotte and Ms. Laura, for all the work that you have done with the superintendent firm search. It was very well done. You gave out information on time, and you explained things, and you also went into some detail that not all the board members, such as myself, knew. And I really appreciate that and your leadership in selecting the firm that went on. And I just want the public to know just how great of a transition that was with both of you guys being in leadership. So I look forward to this year under both of you guys' guidance on the school board. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And the search is not over yet. There's lots of great information to come in just a moment. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of Dr. McQuilkin as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Dr. McQuilkin. Now, yeah, let's. Now we'll move on to appoint a clerk and deputy clerk. Do I have a motion?
I have a
The
recommendation.
superintendent makes a recommendation, okay.
So I do recommend to appoint Caitlin Gilkison as clerk and Doug Aldifer as deputy clerk of the school board for the 2023 calendar year.
Wonderful. Do I hear a motion in that matter?
I move that we follow the superintendent's recommendation for clerk and deputy clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Is there any discussion? I do want to double check. I have a feeling we're good, but I want to make sure. Caitlin and Dr. Aldifer, are you guys good with this? Very good. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Great. Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move on to select a superintendent's designee. Dr. Scheichel, do you have a recommendation?
And I do recommend to appoint Doug Aldifer as the superintendent's designee to attend meetings of the school board in the absence or inability of the superintendent to attend.
Great, thank you. Do I hear a motion as such?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to appoint Dr. Doug Aldifer as the superintendent's designee.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there any discussion? Again, I'm going to ask Doug. Very good, thank you. Dr. Aldifer agrees to this position. So all of those, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Great, 5-0 again. Thank you. Now we have reason to establish a regular meeting schedule. Dr. Scheichel?
The board has approved this meeting schedule previously on August 22nd, but as is customary when the board is reorganized, we will establish that schedule as the regular schedule for the 2023 calendar year. And I do recommend to approve the calendar as it was previously approved on August 22nd, 2022.
Wonderful, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Is there any discussion about the upcoming schedule? We will proceed to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Now we move on to committee appointments. Dr. Scheichel, do you have a recommendation?
The recommendation that you have in front of you is the same recommendation from last year, from 2022. And so certainly this wasn't, any effort to coordinate with individual board members ahead of time. This is a duplicate of the committees that the individual board members have served on. So Mr. Cross served on the Shenandoah Valley Special Education Regional Program, Mr. Falk in the Extension Leadership Council, Dr. McQuilkin on the Massanutten Governor School Board. Ms. Lohr served on the MTC Foundation Board. Ms. Lohr and Mr. Breeden were the liaison committee to the Board of Supervisors. And Dr. McQuilkin also served as a Rockingham Educational Foundation ex officio member. And so my recommendation would be to continue those, but certainly, again, there may be a desire on individual board members' part or by the board in its entirety to make some changes to that.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Or do we? I actually have some concerns about, well, not concerns. I would just like to revisit it and maybe take some time as a board to look at the committees and restructure them. So I would absolutely entertain a motion to table this definitely until this spring when we have a chance to meet as a board and decide if these are the committees we want to continue with. Do I have a motion to table?
I second that motion.
Okay. Okay, so I'll move to table definitely to spring of 2023, and Mr. Cross has seconded. All those in favor of table, is there any discussion on this issue?
I would suggest that we maintain the current, but the current media appointments until such time that the changes are made.
Yeah, because for example, February 22nd is a meeting of the Massanutten Regional Governor's School Board. So you certainly want to have someone in place for that. So
and I don't have the motion from last year in front of me. If we table this, are you saying that if we table it, will it automatically just roll over until we do committee assignments? Or do we need to add an amendment?
That's what I have in mind.
Okay. Okay, so we're all in agreement that the motion is to table it until spring of 2023 and continue with our current committee assignments until this issue is revisited. Is there any further discussion?
Do you have a date in mind in the spring?
No, just once we can all get together and talk about it. I don't have a specific date.
Okay.
Do we want a specific date?
Second meeting in March?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Do we need to amend the motion as such, or we just all gonna?
I move that we amend the motion to specify the date as the second meeting, regular school board meeting in March to when we resolve this.
Great, thank you. And so we have a motion to amend the main motion to add the specific date of the second meeting in March. I need a second. Great, thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. We have a second. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, we'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I'm sorry. All those opposed? Same sign? Great. Motion carries 0-1. The main motion has been amended to add the date of the second school board meeting in March. So is there any further discussion on the main motion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the main motion to table the committee assignments until the second meeting in March. And our current committee assignments will remain in effect until we vote on these new committee assignments. Is any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We will table this item until the second meeting in March. Oh, we didn't waste enough time. We have reason to have a public hearing, but we advertised that the public hearing would be at 7:15. So what, do we want to take a quick recess? Do y'all want to listen to me talk for a minute? What if we switch, what if we do public comments, the general public comments? Can we skip to the general public comments and come back to the public hearing? Does that work for everybody? Okay, so we're going to skip to our public comments. And on the roster in front of me, I have Diana Harmon that has signed up to speak. That is fine. We're going to circle back to the public hearing because I don't want to have the public hearing. I don't want to close the public hearing before 7:15 as it's advertised time was 7:15. So if anybody walks in that door in the next 2 minutes,
Bear with me, I'm not good at this.
Oh, you take your time. Now, there will, we have a 3-minute, let me just go over the ground rules for public comments. You have 3 minutes. I will try to give you a gavel at 30, when you have 30 seconds left. And please, don't be nervous, but please be kind. Okay, thank you.
My daughter had to move, her and her husband with her 4 kids, and they have some health problems. They moved just a little bit out of Rockingham County and didn't know it. They've always went to Rockingham County schools. I've got letters from the doctors. One's got autism, another one's being tested now, and they've always went to Pleasant Valley. And the other son has anxiety real bad, and he goes to Rockingham County, and they can't afford the $4,000 for him to go to school. So I'm here to see if y'all can help me. And I have letters from the doctors. Y'all can call them so that they can stay in school, because they get off the bus at my house, and I live in Mount Crawford. I am in Rockingham County. They just recently moved out of Rockingham County, but it was because they had to. They didn't have a choice. They could only find a house that quick. So is there any way y'all would consider it?
Generally, we don't do a back and forth for public comments. You come and you
Do
state
I
your,
just give it to you?
but I believe that would be something that would be directed towards Dr. Scheichel, and Dr. Scheichel can reach out and talk to you about it tomorrow.
So we've already had an exchange about this via email, and I'll certainly take your documentation just for the board's information. So admission of non-resident students is covered in policy JECR. And the board a few years back changed the annual tuition. I believe it was $3,000 a year per student prior to that to $1,000, but included a statement in the policy that states there shall be no exceptions to the payment of tuition. And also there is language in the policy that states that for a student with an IEP, that the resident division would have to guarantee payment of all related costs. So the request in this case would require a board policy change. So that's the request. It's come to me, and I communicated what our policy currently is, and that because the policy states that there shall be no exceptions, that the only way forward would be a policy change by the school board. But I will gladly, again, I'll take your documentation, and then it's the board's,
Let me know, but I
absolutely,
just-
the board's discretion whether to entertain a policy change.
It would be devastating. The doctors that they talk to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Sandy Emsweiler.
Hi, school board members and parents. I would hope that by this point, you all have researched, as I have, the organization Any Given Child Chandler Valley, which, as you know, is the organization that sponsored the 3rd grade trip to the Forbes Center for an inappropriate performance by the JMU dance group. Per Any Given Child's website, the 3rd graders are once again scheduled to go to the JMU Forbes Center for another JMU dance workshop scheduled on March 31st. Have you reviewed the planned program and know there will not be any more of these inappropriate surprises? Has anyone discussed the issues with the JMU dance program? Also, the 4th graders are scheduled to go to the Forbes Center on February the 17th for a JMU Orchestra Discovery Concert. While this is a different group, which I hope would be more respectful of our children, the performance is still at the Forbes Center. And at the Forbes Center, they read their highly inappropriate white supremacy statement before each performance. I feel the current experience at the JMU Forbes Center is inappropriate for children as well as adults, being forced to listen to their white supremacy statement and possibly being subjected to inappropriate surprises. For these reasons, I would ask you to cancel all field trips to the JMU Forbes Center. I would also ask that you review a full script and visual program before approving any field trips for any organization, as well as guest speakers and guest teachers. that no deviations would be allowed from the approved programs. Let's educate our children to be independent thinkers, not indoctrinate them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Emsweiler. I believe Dr. Scheichel will have a presentation later in the meeting that you'll find of interest, and will address a lot of your concerns. Okay, now we can go back to our public hearing, and I currently have no one signed up to speak on behalf of the public hearing for the budget hearings. Is there anyone that would like to speak about the budget at this time? Okay, this concludes our public hearing for the budget, the 2023-2024 school operating budget. We'll now move on to highlights by board members. And we are going to start with Mr. Cross.
All right, thank you. I hope all the board members had a great Christmas break or Christmas season that we had, and I hope our staff and our students and teachers all had a great time off as well. Tonight I want to highlight Tim Leach, who's the AD athletic director out at Spotswood High School. He has worked for Rockingham County Public Schools for a very long time, and he's going to be resigning here soon and taking on a new job and something new that he wants to do. So thank you to Tim Leach for all the work and time and hard work that you put in there at Spotswood High School, because he took over at Spotswood when things were a little bit shaky in the AD area for some time, and he's done an outstanding job in coordinating and planning events there at Spotswood High School. And I just appreciate all the time and effort that Tim Leach put in and all the years of service he did here at Rockingham County Public Schools. So tonight I want to highlight Tim and say thank you. You're always welcome back, Tim, and I wish you the best of hope going forward in your career. Thanks.
Mr. Falk? Thank you. Let's go Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Chairman Laura. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to be back. And for the calendar year 2023, this Saturday on the 14th at Harrisonburg High School, there will be a job fair, and all people who have licensed teaching degrees are welcome to come and interview for jobs, not only for Rockingham County schools, but for some of the schools in the area. I think there are 8 or 9 schools who are participating, and we welcome and we're hopeful that all the applicants and the people who are interviewing, I wish them all well.
Mr. Breeden?
Thank you, Chair Laura. I was out riding in the old car the other day and contemplating, and I realized that when I came on this board, I was 34 years old. And if the good Lord lets me live one more week, I'll be 61. And so I thought, since you guys do such a great job of highlighting school events, and as I enter into what will certainly be my last year as a board member, that I would like to begin over the next couple of meetings and just giving a shout out to some of the people who have been so instrumental in my development as a board member and have been supportive and role models. And I'm sure that over the course of these next meetings, I'll forget someone. So please do not be offended if I do not mention you, but there won't be time to do all of them. But tonight, and they don't know I'm doing this, so they may not see it. But tonight, I'd like to give a shout out to Dr. Fred Kennan, Marie Dolphemeyer, and Dr. John Kidd. Dr. Kennan was assistant superintendent in Rockingham County Schools for many years, and you could always count on getting a straight shot from him. I looked to some of those who knew and worked with him. You might not always like what he had to say, but you knew that his heart was always with kids, and I'm blessed to say that I keep in touch with Fred even now. Marie Doffmeyer was Caitlin's predecessor many years ago. Marie is just an absolute saint, as is anyone who has to do the board clerk job. But I'm blessed to stay in touch with Marie now, and just thank her so much for her guidance as we in those early years. And John Kidd, I mean, there's really no words to describe. I always think of John saying, "Be ye careful." And what he meant by that is be careful not to do something that's going to adversely affect kids' education. And John and Judy remain dear friends to this day, and we talk frequently. And I'm just so thankful to have had Dr. Kennan, Dr. Kidd, and Marie Doffmeyer grace my life with their expertise and goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. I'm going to go next, and then I'll let you have it. I just wanted to say thank you to Becky Ford for, and I'm glad you're here tonight, for forwarding us the musical performance by Spotswood and Montevideo Middle School. Oh my goodness, folks, do we have some talented kids in Rockingham County. I was able to watch the performance. I wasn't able to go live, but thanks to Ms. Ford, I was able to watch it, and it was fantastic. And I saw recently on Facebook that we've got musicals set, and I'm looking forward to hearing what all the musicals are, and I'm looking forward to going to all the musicals. And we've got winter sports that are in full swing, and just amazing things happening in Rockingham County Public Schools. I would like to thank Dr. Scheichel. The last time we were here, I asked for no snow on Friday before school ended, and we were able to do that. So we had a wonderful drive-through and got to see lots of smiling faces at Lacey Spring Elementary. And they're just great things happening in Rockingham County Public Schools. And I hope everybody gets the chance to experience something great in Rockingham this year. And again, a big highlight for me is being elected as board chair. So thank you to everyone for trusting me with the leadership for the board for our children. So thank you. And I'm going to now pass it to Dr. Scheichel.
I have a few highlights. Thank you, Madam Chair. So on Friday, we had about 85 11th graders and the teachers at JMU in the Hall of Presidents for an event that was related to our community dialogue process. And from the very beginning, we've said, when we talk about how to create caring and safe environments for our students, that student voice needs to be part of that. And so a few years ago, Amy Johnson was an English teacher at East Rockingham High School, and that conducted this amazing project where students came up with a plan to improve school safety. And it was this 30-page document. We've looked at so much of the research since then, and the students, really covered all of the topics, both in terms of students feeling a sense of belonging, in terms of even things such as anonymous reporting tools, and all the other pieces. And so for this project, Amy is now the librarian at Spotswood. I asked her to work with 11th grade teachers so we really could have broad representation. And so on Friday, the students met, and students from all 4 high schools were there. They talk to each other about all the things that are important to them. Mental health, for example, just as in the community dialogue group, mental health is a key piece for them. And a number of other things. They came up with suggestions for how school can be improved. And it was really a joy to hear them explain what they would like to see. And I will say, for a few years now, we've heard students come to us and say, there should be a student representative on the school board. And the issue was always, well, how does one student represent really 12,000 students? And then we tried a student advisory, and again, it was a small group. And so in terms of achieving some representation was really difficult. And I wish I'd had this project with the students 5 years ago, because one of their suggestions that the board also will hear at the first February meeting here is exactly about that, how to bring student voice to the table. And there's some really, really good suggestions. So that was a highlight. And when it comes to mental health, Governor Youngkin's budget proposal for the upcoming year includes significant funding. Again, there's an initiative related to mental health in schools through the community service boards in terms of making additional funds available to help students. And then also related to Governor Youngkin's lab school initiative. Just before the holidays, Dean Lesperance from JMU and I had a chance to present to Governor Youngkin's lab school committee. So there's an evaluation process, and RCPS, the first school division in the state to be ready with their lab school proposal. And we had amazing conversations. I thought it was going to be a committee of members of the Board of Education, but it turned out there were former superintendents, White House officials, former education department officials, and philanthropy organizations. And it was a really, really good conversation. So we'll see. Again, over the next month or so, we should have a little bit more information. But that was certainly a highlight too, and how those people looked at the proposal that we brought with JMU for lab schools in Rockingham County, potentially beginning fall 2023. But again, depending on the timelines, could also be a little bit later. So those were my highlights. And again, the fine arts events, obviously, are a big deal on Friday. This week, or on Saturday, actually, at 3 p.m., there'll be a City County Honor Band at Spotswood High School. So I encourage everyone to attend who has a chance to see them. They work with professionals for the day, and then there's a performance at 3, and that's always a major highlight that's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move into action items. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes of December 12th, 2022 and January 4th, 2023.
Great, thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. All those, is there any discussion regarding the minutes? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you, Caitlin, for doing a wonderful job on our minutes. Next, we have the bills and mileage.
I recommend approval of the December 2022 bills and mileage as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a motion as such?
I move that we approve the bills, the December bills of 2022.
Great. Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm going to go with Mr. Cross. Thank you, Mr. Cross.
That's fine.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great, motion carries 5-0. Next, we have the field trips.
Board members, you have a number of field trips for your approval tonight. Spotswood High School Honor Band, January 20th through the 22nd, 7 students to Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Indoor percussion, March 31st through April 2nd, 2023. 26 students to the Hampton Coliseum in Hampton, Virginia. FCCLA State Conference, April 13 through 16, 4 students to Virginia Beach. And then from Broadway High School, FFA ACES Leadership Conference, February 18 and 19, 18 students to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And the DECA State Leadership Conference, March 2nd through the 5th, 45 students to Virginia Beach. And I recommend approval of those field trips.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Cross. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there any discussion on the field trips? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The field trips are approved by unanimous vote. Next, we have the adoption of Civil Rights Assurance Policy, ACA.
Board members, this is an annual approval, and you have the policy ACA Civil Rights Certificate in your materials, and I recommend approval of the Civil Rights Assurance Certificate, again, policy ACA as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Motion carries. I'm not very good with scores. Next, we have a resolution for approving a loan application to the Literary Fund.
Board members, this resolution requires a little bit of explanation. As we've discussed in the past, our next steps in the capital improvement plan include an expansion of Broadway High School. And the funding for the expansion of Broadway High School, we've always mentioned that this was money that the school division would be able to have without county borrowing money for this. And so this is a change because the literary loan application is for $14 million for Broadway High School, and there's a good reason for that. This is a change from the original plan, and the reason is that there's a favorable interest rate of 3%. Typically, these interest rates range somewhere around 5 to 6% for other county borrowing. And so the difference over 20 years is about $4 million. And so actually using this loan application will save county taxpayers that money. And it's not guaranteed, of course, that we would be successful with this loan application, but if the application is successful, then the funds originally dedicated to the expansion of Broadway High School would be used for the next few projects in that list. So that would be the renovations at Elkton Elementary and McAkeesville Elementary. And one reason is it's not clear that this low interest rate would remain in place for this loan. This resolution will go to the Board of Supervisors on January 11th. So there is awareness already by individual members of the Board of Supervisors. It's been coordinated with county staff, and the conversations, again, with individual members of the Board of Supervisors have been had. And so there's that support. Ultimately, of course, all money we have at the end of the year, always goes back to the Board of Supervisors. And so the money dedicated for Broadway is already held by county government. And so, again, in collaboration with county government, this is a good opportunity to actually get a low interest rate loan that is otherwise not available to the county. So this, again, saving county taxpayers a significant amount of money. And I recommend approval of this resolution for the literary loan application. And this will require a roll call vote.
Yes, thank you.
You have an idea of when that would be approved? Certain time of the
Yeah,
day.
I don't have an approval date, so these will be sent to Richmond. So they're waiting for that again, and then there'll be a process there. But certainly, either way, if this loan application doesn't go through, the funds for the Broadway expansion, of course, are already there. So it's not a concern in that sense, but we should have it, in time, obviously, for that project.
Okay.
But I don't have a specific date for you.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation for the literary loan application as presented.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Is there any further discussion? This is a roll call vote, so I'll turn it over to Ms. Gilkerson.
Mr. Breeden.
Aye.
Mr. Cross. Aye. Mr. Falk. Chair Lohr.
Aye.
Dr. McQuilkin.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next on the agenda is the budget calendar for 23-24.
Board members, you have the proposed budget calendar for 23-24 in your materials. You may notice that some of those dates have already passed. However, that's not unusual because of the nature of those first steps. So for example, in October, budget info was distributed to principals. And then in December, requests from principals were due. And then all the requests were due to Ms. Mast last Friday. And so then today we had the public hearing. So those were all scheduled and they're fairly standard. And then the rest of the calendar, of course, explains when you will get information related to all the budget requests, the governor's budget, and so on, until vote that is scheduled currently for March 27th on the 23-24 budget, and I recommend approval of the budget calendar as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the budget calendar for 2023-2024 as presented.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Is there any further discussion on the budget calendar? I have a question. If we wanted to entertain Ms. Harmon's request, would we need to do that by the end of the budget? Would we need to have that in by January 23rd? Does that make sense?
When you, it's not a budget-related item.
It's a straight policy change. It doesn't have.
That's correct.
No
That'd be
budget
policy
impact.
JECR. You would have to, now again, certainly there's some amount in the budget related to tuition, but that's an amount that wouldn't necessarily have to happen here. So that's just as with many of the other requests, you know, sometimes, again, once all of these requests come to you, then there are also board discussions individually about, you know, additions that board members may want to see or changes that board members want to see. So the tuition that we collect is not at an amount where you'd have to say, oh, now we really have to rethink the budget.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the budget calendar proposal. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Now we have high school course offerings for 2023-24, and I believe Mr. Fitzgerald's going to present to us.
Ms. Lohr, before I start tonight, it warms my heart to see you as chairman of the board. I remember having you in class, I think it was probably 30 plus years ago. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that, but that's good to see that you're using that parliamentary procedure you learned many, many years ago. During the December 12th, 2022 school board meeting, a list of proposed high school courses was presented to you guys for information for the upcoming school year. Tonight, I'm asking for your approval of those courses so that we can go ahead and start scheduling students.
And I do recommend approval of the proposed high school offerings as presented by Mr. Fitzgerald, our amazing CTE director.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, for your kind words. I do want to say real quick, just a quick commercial. A lot of the parley that I've learned, some of it came from my time in FFA. A lot of it came from my children's time in FFA. And if you ever get a chance to watch the national, Google it, National FFA Parliamentary Procedure Finals, it is amazing the way these kids do parley. So much better than me. So, okay, now that I've digressed, do I have a motion to support the superintendent's recommendation?
Follow the superintendent's recommendation to approve the high school course offering for the 2023-24 as presented by Eric Fitzgerald, Director of Career and Technical Education.
Thank you, Mr. Fulk. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Cross. Is there any further discussion on this?
Well, I just wanted to state again how excited I am about a couple of the course offerings that we're adding that are really, really going to increase the opportunities for our children. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Welcome. I agree.
Yes, I think it's real estate, and what are a couple of the other ones that are really?
We have a number of them. We have real estate, and we have a couple theater classes, digital arts classes. There's a number of them on there this year. I think there's 7 altogether.
Great. That's wonderful, wonderful opportunities for our kids. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, we have the Career and Technical Joint Advisory Board. I guess you're going to stay up here for that, aren't you?
Staying right here. Yes, ma'am. The Joint Career and Technical Education Advisory Board validates CTE curriculum each year for Rockingham County Public Schools, Harrisonburg City Public Schools, and our regional center, Massanutten Technical Center. Members of the committee are selected in categories based on federal Perkins requirements so that we can receive Perkins funding for our CTE programs. Now, the members on the advisory committee are selected or given terms of 2 years, and we have about half the members that rotate off each year, and they can be renewed, and a lot of them choose to do that. Nominations for the committee are made by committee members, by teachers, by school officials, and then representatives of our business and industry community, along with the Virginia Employment Commission. Attached or in your package, you have a document that lists all of the committee members as of right now. The new members and the members that are being renewed are in italics. All of the members serve for 2-year terms, with the exception of the student member, which is a senior that has a 1-year term. Tonight, I ask for your approval of that committee as listed on the in your packet.
And I do recommend approval of the CT Advisory Board for 2023 as presented by Mr. Eric Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel, and thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there any discussion? I'm just going to say, as part of our discussion, I have a close relationship to one of the members, so I'm going to abstain from this vote. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? And so the motion carries 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now moving on to information items and our superintendent search firm presentation.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Scheichel. First and foremost, let me thank you on behalf of my colleague Kevin Kastner and BWP for selecting us to assist you with your superintendent search. I want to assure you that we know our purpose, and that is to do everything in our power to make sure that we assist you in identifying a pool of candidates from which you will choose your next superintendent. As we do our work, we want you to know that we are committed to sincere effort, high intention, intelligent execution as we work with you through the steps included in helping you do your work. Dr. Kastner and I are the team located and working mostly in Virginia. We come with extensive experience. Dr. Kastner and I are both former superintendents with 25 years of experience. Dr. Kastner in Albemarle County, 11 years, and I in Roanoke City for 12 years. We have spent time in other districts in high-level positions. Dr. Kastner has a consulting business, as do I. I am on the faculty at Virginia Tech. Together, Dr. Kastner and I have a national connection with others who work for BWP across this country. Likewise, we will be working throughout all of this with those other contacts to make sure that we identify candidates who will be a good fit and match for you. So that you have an idea of the work that we've done, together, Dr. Kastner and I have done 42 searches, including this one. As you know, we assisted you 5 years ago. But you can see the list of searches that we've done in Virginia together. We've worked together for the last 12 years. Frederick County, we just completed. Arlington County, Stafford County, Winchester, Staunton, Harrisonburg. Dr. Kastner, in fact, has gone far beyond 42 searches, working all over this country, assisting boards. And again, I say to you, we understand our purpose, and our goal is to do nothing short of excellence in assisting you as you make decisions, who you will interview and who you will select. Be very clear. Dr. Kastner and I make no decisions. We make recommendations for you. You are the ultimate decision maker. We will personalize this search for you. We will tailor the process to your needs, which means we are in touch with you on a regular basis. We will identify candidates who match what it is you and this community say you want in your next superintendent. We will present those candidates to the board. Present, not promote. We do not have a stable of candidates that we automatically roll out to you. Candidates must apply, they will be screened, and we will present those candidates to you, and Dr. Kastner will talk to you about that. And finally, I want to reiterate, you are the decision makers. The objectives for the search, we will establish a process that assists the board to identify and select the best candidate to lead you forward. You will have access to all of the candidates, but you will select the one who will be your next superintendent. We will assist in creating community and staff support for the search by involving them in the process. Dr. Kastner will talk about that step of community engagement. We will aggressively recruit highly qualified candidates. And finally, at the successful completion of the search, within the board's timeline, your budget and expectations. At this time, Dr. Kastner will walk you through the 4 steps in the process that we will use, talk with you about some decisions that you need to make, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Good evening. We're glad to be back with you. We aren't the same group that was here in 2017, but our process hasn't changed. We've had the opportunity as we work with different school divisions to try to keep up with things. And it's important to keep up with things. We know public schools aren't the same as they were 2 years ago. It's a different world. We also know that this very important decision that you'll make for your superintendent is a responsibility that you definitely, we know, takes very seriously. And you're building on a wellness situation. You have a good system. But during this process, there's a lot of momentum that will occur where you have a new group of people that weren't always here in 2017. You have some changes in the board. And all of a sudden, as we go around your community in the community engagement process, we intend to engage them and respect them and hear their work and get back to you on it. It's important that we have this meeting tonight, even though some of this information we've previously shared with you when we did the interview process. And the reason is that this should be a transparent process. And we want to try to engage the community. We also want to acknowledge that when you do the BWP process, you know that you're inviting us in as guests to your community to listen to all members of your community, either where they go through a survey or they meet with us when we're here during the communication process, or they send us emails. And you're trusting us to record what we're hearing. And sometimes we do these processes and some of the things are a little hard to hear. That's not the case here. But if we have a situation where, let's say, as people would look at a board and they have issues or they always have split votes, they have meetings that go on till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, all this is part of the process. But here, again, we're building upon something that's already a strength. And we're also doing this at probably the most ideal time of the year to attract candidates. So when you look at what we have up before you, all the objectives we intend to meet, and I want to go through some details. And the whole issue of it starts out with specifications. What specifications means we need direction from you as a board. You have a folder in front of you. And on the left-hand side of that folder is a sheet that talks about key decisions. Now, some of these key decisions we should be able to get tonight. Some of it we're going to need to work with the calendars and staff to be able to make firm dates when we're talking about the community engagement. So the idea that once you determine when you're going to have your community engagement session, we're also going to be working with a survey. You need to know that the board will approve of the different groups we're going to be meeting. They're going to improve the survey, and they're going to improve the announcement. This will not occur this evening. The most important decision that you as a board can make this evening is whether you decide that you want to have a confidential superintendent search, or do you want to have a superintendent search where the names of applicants could become public. If you do that, you're going to have a much shallower pool because sitting superintendents are going to be reluctant. In Virginia, school boards have that choice. If we were to go to South Carolina, the 3 finalists' names will be revealed. When we do work in South Carolina, the numbers in the applicant pool is smaller. So as we go around the country, the data is pretty clear that if you're trying to attract the best possible candidate, that you want to consider a confidential search. And we would need to have some board agreement, if you could, this evening, to establish that. I'm asking for direction.
I'm going to defer to our chairman of the search committee this time.
We thank you very much for coming this evening and presenting not only to the board, but to the public at large. We are a live streamed board meeting so that there are not only the people sitting here this evening, but those who wish to join us can do so. After listening to your request as to whether we should have an open search or a confidential search, I'm going to make a motion that we have a confidential search.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. We have a motion on the floor for a confidential search. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Is there discussion?
I appreciate you, both of you, Dr. Kastner coming and Dr. Harris coming as well and speaking to the board during the interview process. And I think it was Mr. Harris that really has sold me on a lot of everything, just because he's like your dad sitting in the room or your granddad, and if you get out of line, he's going to give you a good whooping. But he's a down to earth man. Is honest, seems honest, and I trust just the time I've had the chance to speak with Mr. Harris and talk about these things during the interview process. And so I would agree tonight to make it confidential.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion of a confidential search for superintendent. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will be having a confidential search.
One of the things that you're doing in this process is you're doing a search that's not just for Virginia. We have 136 school systems and great potential superintendents in those systems that could very well have an interest in your job. But also, if you go national, there might be other people that have been very successful in Virginia or now in different other states. And so if your obligation is fulfilled in trying to find the strongest candidate available, then you have a national search. That wouldn't preclude if you have an internal candidate. But if you have an internal candidate, and we've had this happen in the past, if they would be vetted through a national pool, then that will give you a confidence and also an expectation that you've done your due diligence, whatever decision you make. So this does happen, and we'd just like to say that it is important to go through the robustness of a national search and a quality pool, of which I can assure you the only candidates that we would be recommending to you to consider would have the match and fit based on this information. Now, to obtain this information, you can see here we want to have a community engagement process. Now, in the community engagement process, we want to meet with each individual board member. We will take notes when we have those meetings, and not by name, but we will create a composite information of what board members are saying. And if we meet with groups throughout your community, every time we sit down with a group of people, we also will take notes, and we actually will read back what we hear. And eventually we will do a report that will come to you as a board. And that report, again, is going to be different than the report in 2017. But when you receive that report, it's public record. And it's all this information, including the presentation this evening, the report that we'll make with engagement, that will lead to a data-driven recommendation for a leadership profile. That's what we're trying to do. Last time we met over 200 people. We had over 750 surveys. So we took the quantitative information, the qualitative information, and we used that to create a draft profile. I suspect this time we will probably have a larger participation. One of the things we know now that if we can ever have meetings where we can live stream as well as just having people in attendance, we actually are getting greater participation, which is what you want. But also you want to have something that people would be aware is inclusive, not exclusive. And that's the goals we have. So in the specification stage, we're going to collect that information. We're going to run it by you as we go through it. And then we're going to get into recruitment. Now, recruitment really comes down to the fact that people choose to where they want to apply to work. And if they're going to choose, they want to go to a place that they can bring their family. They need to know what the valley is. The valley is different than other places. And they need to know the culture and the values. And they need to know that they can be the type of mix that you're looking for that's going to represent someone that's going to have those type of leadership skills, but also has experience in similar type communities. So having someone that would just live in a total urban area that didn't have an example of something that's a little mixed, when you're talking about the importance of FFA or any of the other types of things you know that are vital parts of your community. So these are the things that are going to happen. You have a good system. It's a wonderful size because you have a little bit of a central office. It needs to also be competitive as regard to compensation. But in the recruitment stage, as we complete this evening, it will be on our website starting tomorrow, where we will then give more details when we complete the announcement. We're recommending in the timeline a recruitment period through March 30th. And you're going to see that I have a draft calendar in there, but that's the type of thing that we're going to need to run by you and make sure that works. Our whole goal, we know you have a sitting superintendent until July 1, although sometimes they do take some of their leave before then. Oscar, you're going to have to decide that. But the whole idea is trying to make that successful transition, which would mean you want to have someone that the board's going to be ready to announce sometime in May so that you can have conversations and have some job sharing as you go through some of the transition process. So as far as the recruitment, we do all the appropriate national journals and everything. But our recommendation is no longer to do a 60-day window. We can have a cost of about $1,300 by doing a 30-day window. And we believe that doing things all electronically and not paper copy also is going to save you some money. I do not think it's going to sacrifice the quality of the search, but also there's different connections that we have. And Wayne will tell you from not only the people in Virginia, but work we've done in other states. So we're in good shape. We get into the recruitment. And then as you go through this, and we're going to be asking you to approve this, but again, I put a copy in your packet, so we'd like you to have all this information. Now, salary parameters. One of the things we recommend that you don't go high, you don't go low, but it is a value of your top leader that you're trying to set a standard where you're trying to attract and retain not only your superintendent, you're also trying to do that with your teachers and staff. So that information is a matter of being data-driven, and you want to look at that, and at that time, we'll talk about that in discussion. What we'd recommend in the announcement, just it be appropriate based upon commensurate experience. So we don't like to put a number in there when we do an advertisement. We want to have some flexibility where someone's been a sitting superintendent or someone, this is their very first job. All that you will need to consider. When we get into assessments, the one thing you're counting on is we're not going to bring you anybody that we haven't vetted, not only in looking at their applications, but knowing people that know them. They're going to tell us things on the record or off the record. And we're going to have to do Google searches. We're going to have to do deep background checks. And our goal is to not have any surprises. Now, I've been through 52 of these, and we haven't had any surprises yet. But I will tell you, it's harder now. Social media, sometimes people are taking shots that aren't always accurate. But the thing is, when you announce whoever you're going to announce, everybody in your community is going to be doing the same check-in. And sometimes they aren't checking all of a sudden to say hooray. They're trying to see if there's anything there they're missing. If you work in a union state, they're going to check with the union leaders. So you don't have that. But the fact is, you're counting on us. And we actually will recommend hiring a firm to do things far more than we can do, whether it's speeding tickets or checking bankruptcy. All these things, when you're talking about assessment, before we're going to recommend a candidate that has the qualities and characteristics of your profile, this is something you'll be counting on us. The other thing we'll be doing, and I say this, although some of you have been through this, we will give you suggested protocols of the do's and don'ts when you have an interview. There are certain things legally you just can't do. And we want to make sure that you know that information. I know that you'll follow it. Have we had exceptions? Yes, but it's very, very rare. We also would be happy to give you some sample questions for your consideration that when you're trying to prepare for the interview. So you don't have to reinvent a lot of this. And when we work with your clerk, we're going to have a lot of information on a thumb drive so that we can help make this efficient and not take any more staff time that's necessary. However, when it comes to taking staff time and doing this and trying to get people to meet with us, it should have an importance because of what this merits in trying to get the best possible candidate and trying to have that involvement of internal staff or even external people in your community. So we go through all the assessment, we get to the point of doing all this, and we get to the point of trying to look at this process and knowing, as we've already stated, we're going to do everything in the best interest for you. We might not tell you what you might want to hear sometimes, but we'll give you the pros and cons, and then you're going to be making the decision. Wayne made a good point. You're the decision makers here. And in this, we think we can make this a pretty seamless process. You have I think the last slide is the general dates here, which we can work with. And at this point, Wayne, would you like to add anything before I ask if they have any questions?
Let me say something about the community engagement and how that helps with match and fit for the candidates that we bring to you based on what we have determined is match and fit for you to decide, do you interview them? We will take everything we hear in those discussions, the interviews, the public forums, based on 3 questions. What are the strengths of Rockingham County Public Schools? What are the challenges that the next superintendent will face? And what are the qualities, characteristics, experiences, skills, and knowledge the next superintendent will need to be able to demonstrate? Given the responses to those 3 questions from that community engagement, you will approve the leadership profile. We will use that then to determine who from the total pool are the top 4 to 6 candidates. We present those candidates to you in a closed meeting. You decide who to interview. You decide who the top finalists are. And then you decide ultimately who is your next superintendent. So that's a capsule of this whole process. Our goal is to bring you match and fit, top 4 to 6, you decide. And we look forward to the work. We look forward to doing that.
Question.
Do you also do the background check for internal candidates?
Yes.
We will.
The same background that you do for those outside of?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said differently during the interview.
You heard Kevin refer to vetting.
Okay.
When we walk through the application to determine who's starting to rise to the top, when we select that top 6, 8, 10, Kevin makes a phone call to some, I make a phone call. We ask a few questions. It's not a formal interview yet. Once we narrow that top 8 down 4 to 6, then Kevin's going to make a formal interview call. And we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to pick up the phone and call some people that I know who know that candidate, who that candidate doesn't know that I know, or who didn't write a reference. We do that for all of those candidates. So that's part of this background check in the sense of vetting. And then I'll call the person Kevin called, and he'll call the person I called to do formal questions. We make calls to other people who we know. We call their references. All of that's background. But then when you get to the top 2 candidates, that's when you get a deep background check. But we Google and we do social media checking as well.
There's a group called Millennium Security, all former military, and they've never let me down. And they just are straight shooters.
So you heard Kevin say, we don't want any surprises. We don't want to be surprised. We don't want you to be surprised. The one final thing, there is a guarantee. If you select from the 4 to 6 we present to you, we guarantee that that person will stay a minimum of 2 years, or we will come back and do the search for free, only for expenses. Folks, we don't want to come back. And I will tell you, in the searches that Kevin and I have done, there's only been one instance where we had to go back, and that was because the person was promoted to the state superintendent position. That's 1 out of a lot. Are there other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you all for your time. Thank you for agreeing to help us with this. I think it is widely regarded that the superintendent search is the most important thing a school board can do.
Yes.
And I think we're all committed to finding the very best candidate that we can for Rockingham County Public Schools. And thank you for being our partner in that.
Thank you.
Be safe heading home.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the superintendent update.
members of the board and the public. I have a few items for your information today. One, actually, I just added today, just because of questions I've received related to some chatter that's just on social media. Let's see if Greg has this. So, and it's okay. I mean, that first slide, I don't really need the slide up. So, there we go. Okay. So I've had a few questions from people asking me when we would move 8th grade over to East Rockingham High School, right? From Elkton Middle School to East Rockingham. And my answer has been the same to everyone who's asked me, that there's no plan to move 8th grade over to the high school. I think the misconception comes from my presentation about the capital improvement plan. So we looked at what the next few steps are in the capital improvement plan: Broadway expansion, of course, the renovations at Elkton Elementary, McGackey'sville, expansions of Montevideo and Spotswood. MTC has some issues as well. And when we looked at the capacity and where schools currently are, I showed that Elkton Middle School is currently, I believe 15 students was the number, 15 students over capacity. And so that, of course, leads to the question, well, what are we going to do about that? And so my response back then was that it all depends, right? So most of the growth in Rockingham County occurs in the urban development area. So the Spotswood, Montevideo attendance area, Cub Run, Peakview. And even with Grottoes and the South River attendance area having moved to the East Rock attendance area, again, the growth is significant there. So Peakview and Cub Run, again, they're pretty much full. And if we hadn't moved the South River attendance area, Spotswood would be more than 100 students over capacity by now. And even the plan for the expansion of Broadway that would allow us to move Route 11 north to the Broadway attendance area, you'd still be full at Spotswood. So, all of these, we talked about this when that redistricting happened, that there are really multiple steps. And so then the question was, again, how do we handle Elkton Middle? And it really all depends on what the growth in the East Rock Elkton Middle attendance area is. So right now, we're not seeing significant growth. So we've had schools way more over capacity in the past. I remember Spotswood, I believe, was at a couple hundred over capacity. And so there are some short-term steps unless you really see that significant growth. And so when the growth occurs, that's when steps have to be taken. And I said, that obviously is not something that is my recommendation. It's not something that would happen anytime soon with this board, but in the future, there are multiple options. One, obviously, always is simply expanding the middle school. Right? And Mr. Cross had, talked about the size of the cafeteria and whether we needed to expand Elkton Middle. But when no growth is occurring, and even though you're slightly over capacity, it's not as urgent as when you have a school that's rapidly growing. Peakview added something like 60 new students just in 1 year, right? So you see that much more explosive growth there. And so I said, expansion is certainly one option, but there are also always options to consider where you have current capacity. So when the county government and the school board decide to take on a project, there's always that question, well, what else can we do instead? And so one other option is to use existing capacity. That can happen sometimes in school divisions with elementary schools, where elementary schools are split and they say, okay, we have a lot of room at this elementary school, but they'll end up at 2 different middle schools or high schools. In other cases, grade levels are shifted. So Rockingham County, this was before I was superintendent, there was a time when 5th graders, I believe, came up to Elkton Middle School. So for a couple of years, the 5th graders were at the middle school until, again, then the relief came in other ways. Elkton Elementary expanded and Riverbend was built. And so one of the suggestions that we had talked about previously was, can you move 8th grade over to the high school, right? And so it's an option that exists. There are other options that exist too. If you want to use existing capacity, again, that's just one option. Elkton Elementary has plenty of space. There's also the option of leaving sixth grade at the elementary. So there are just capacities that exist where you have hundreds of seats available. And I said, from my perspective, looking at other school divisions, I believe Shenandoah County has a high school that's 8 through 12. And there are many, many others that's an option that because you can, of how much space you have at East Rock, you could have a separate wing. We do this in middle school with sixth graders, then a separate wing. You have, a little bit more of a self-contained environment. But at no point did I say that eighth graders at Elkton Middle would be moved to the high school. That'd be years down the road, that conversation, but it's one of the options. And so when these are actually questions that come up when we present to the Capital Improvement Plan Committee, because when you look at a school division and you say, hey, we need to expand, we need to maybe build another building, yet division-wide, you have hundreds or more than 1,000 open seats in schools. That's a logical question that we also get. So rather than expanding, where can you move students? So that's where that came from. And again, because I've received a number of questions now, like that this was actually a plan that was being put in place. I just wanted to clarify that. So there's no current plan to move eighth grade to East Rock. We're 15 over. And again, because of the low level of growth in that area, you have time to see where that goes. Now, again, if housing developments are approved in Grottoes and all of a sudden you see this influx, right, in Elkton, right, East Rock, the capacity is there because of the proposed Anglo development years ago that just didn't materialize. It gives the school board time. So that's important to understand. So I wanted to clear it up publicly because, one by one, I just have to explain that to everyone who calls me and explain that that's not really an existing plan. Forbes Center field trip. So came up earlier. So the Forbes Center field trip on December 8th, we had a field trip to a dance performance at the Forbes Center, organized through Any Given Child. And then on December 12th, on Monday, Ms. Harold, who is also here tonight, spoke about her concerns with that field trip. And the three of the main points that she made from her perspective, she anticipated a holiday performance. That also she talked about the land acknowledgement statement that was read at the beginning of the performance, and then also talked about themes of the performance. And so what I said, this was, again, just before holiday break. So I started talking to Any Given Child. I spoke to JMU. Ms. Harrell and I had 3 phone conversations over those couple of weeks. We talked probably total for more than an hour, I would say, and had a really good conversation. And there's something I want to say right off the bat. It's interesting how when a 3-minute public comment piece is then used for everyone else's purposes. Right? And I will say this happened on both sides. Right? So there were news stories that then characterized Ms. Harold as a racist, right, for saying what she did. On the other hand, of course, it was all of it was garbage, that we need to cut our ties with the Forbes Center. We should never send kids there again. We should cut our ties with JMU and everything in between. Right? And I will say this, she doesn't deserve any of that. I have found our conversations to be incredibly positive, to be nuanced, to talk about why it is that Ms. Harold had those concerns and that they were legitimate concerns and what the steps can be that we can take to not just say, oh, it's all nothing, or we should never send kids to the Forbes Center again, but what actually happened and how can we take steps to make sure that if the same performance had happened again, that Ms. Harold would have not felt the need to come to the school board. So I certainly talked to her, talked to teachers, I talked to a few teachers, but I surveyed teachers anonymously, talked to school administrators, and talked to some parent contacts, parents that actually had students who attended the performance. So Any Given Child, the organization that we've been working with for a few years, is an organization, it's one of at least 15 chapters nationwide that attempts to make art experiences available to students who otherwise may never have those experiences, whether those are orchestra performances, whether it's, again, dance, whether it's, people coming in and performing. They actually get access to some world-class performers. And the reason for that is that the Any Given Child organization was created in partnership with the Education Department at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. We all know the Kennedy Center and the level of quality that the Kennedy Center puts out, and the Education Department worked with this organization to make these available. And so the Any Given Child has a board. Oftentimes, for example, our fine arts supervisor is part of that. And then there are simply conversations with different organizations to determine what events might be available to our students. And so there, JMU, Forbes Center, we've done events there for a while. We may say, hey, we have a dance performance coming up. You may want to send your third graders. And then at the beginning of the year, even at the end of the previous year, we get a list. And so we get a list of performances that are available. And so we have performances available to all students across grade levels. And of course, just like with many other places, we don't get exact scripts or choreographies, but there's certainly the understanding that all the organizations that participate try to take care that it's appropriate, right? And so that's what the real question there is. It's not an all or nothing proposition, but why was Ms. Harold upset by what she saw there? And so a lot of it, of course, has to do with communication. And I think even the communication that we did receive wouldn't necessarily, it may have, if that had been sent to parents, maybe it would have not led to the idea that this is a holiday performance, but still, it's not really descriptive enough. So simply says that dancers from the Virginia Repertory Dance Company will perform 2 choreographic works from the upcoming show. So the 8th was the first time that was performed, and then 9th through the 11th, the Forbes Center had public performances. So by the time we heard about it on Monday, there were no more performances scheduled. So it was a much larger event for the general public. But this is basically what the communication was. And there was a question about how the permission slips were decorated. I talked to every school. I asked them what the permission slip said. Not all of them said exactly the same thing. So for example, here, this is the John Wayland field trip permission slip. This is from a family. We obviously redacted the name just so it's clear that this wasn't just a preprint. And what it says is, this is sponsored by Any Given Child, Shenandoah Valley for RCPS third graders. There's no cost. We will not be able to bring chaperones. So for Ms. Harold, she had no idea why we wouldn't be bringing chaperones. Right? That wasn't really explained in that one. At other schools, it simply was mentioned that this is because of space constraints. Forbes Center can seat 450 people. We have 880 some third graders. So that's where that decision came from. If we want to allow all 8th graders to go to a performance, then you barely have room even for the teachers. Now, you always know that some students aren't going to attend, but there was no explanation in this particular case that it was because of space constraints, simply no chaperones, right? And all of these things, I think, add up to what someone expects to see, I think, in a performance. Now, Ms. Harold was allowed to go. She took the place of one of our assistants and did attend the performance. There's also, again, misinformation out there that she talked about a performance she didn't personally see. She did. She was able to attend, right? And then brought that concern. So the field trip was not at any of the school advertised as a holiday performance. None of the communication indicated that it was, and the field trip form wasn't really adorned with any Christmas or holiday themed decorations either. However, it's interesting, I spoke to another parent, and that parent asked me, so are we not going to be able to send the kids to the Forbes Center anymore? Because my child was the happiest she had been all year when she came back. She loved it. Other parents said, my child now wants to be a student when she grows up in the School of Dance. And I said, well, so far I haven't seen any permission slip with any Christmas decoration. And that parent, who's also a teacher in the county, said, no, our school did. And so I showed the permission slip, and her response was, well, I mean, we get about 100 papers in December, right? And many of them are related to holidays. So, whether it's, some tree decoration or any other of the many pieces of paper that went home. And so I think the reason that someone would expect this to be a holiday performance, well, it's a dance performance. It's in December. We're approaching the holidays. And there was no other communication. So when we don't have information, we do fill in the blanks. And it's perfectly reasonable for someone to think, when I think, oh, it's December, we're going to a dance, I think Nutcracker, right? So whatever it may be. And so it's not unreasonable that's what people believed it would be. But I will say, I've checked with all the principals, how it was advertised, looked at the emails, looked at the permission slips. So that's a perception, and we have to deal with that, right? And I think the third one is the big piece there. There wasn't enough information to think otherwise, right? So that's just how it is. I refer to it as a land acknowledgement statement. That's how others have referred to it as well. It's the College for the Visual and Performing Arts at JMU, Indigenous and Enslaved Peoples Acknowledgement. Has multiple components. It talks about acknowledging the fact that Native Americans lived in this area, and that is being acknowledged. Also acknowledging the history of slavery tied to James Madison and the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. And then I think the statement that people online at least were upset about is the third part. We recognize that the painful histories, and it's always important to read every word, the histories of white supremacy persist in present-day racial realities and privileges at this university and our communities. We invite all to commit to dismantling racism and oppression by creating change where we live and work. And so in my conversation with Ms. Harold, because again, online, it's all, the statement itself is nonsense. We had a very good conversation. And I hope it's okay if I share this. Ms. Harold said, it's not the statement itself that's history, but it is that I came to a performance, expected a holiday performance with my grandson. She talked last time about why that was, this particularly affected him and then the performance. And I just didn't expect it, right? So there was no heads up. And in addition to that, it's just inappropriate for third graders, right? So that was the conversation there. Is this, even if historically accurate, is this appropriate for third graders? So historically accurate, well, when we talk about the histories and how the histories of white supremacy affect people today, when you look at Native Americans and African American community obviously as well, 1924 Racial Integrity Act, so that act that you'd heard about before with the one-drop rule. So other than the number of different racial categories after the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, only 2 racial categories existed. One was white, and again, single drop rule. So any drop of non-white blood basically makes you colored. So that's the other category, colored. Now there was one exception, oftentimes referred to as the Pocahontas exception. So you could have 1/16 or less. So if you had, if you were a quarter Native American, you were colored, right? Half Native American, you were colored. Both, parents, you were colored. But if it was less than 1/16, great-great-grandmother, or less, and there was no drop of anything other than Native American, then you could actually qualify as white. And I guess in some way that's why it's called the Pocahontas rule. So Pocahontas descendants, if it was just Pocahontas and then that was the only Native American blood, you could actually qualify as white. Now, William Plecker, who was responsible for vital records, then changed the birth certificate rules in Virginia. So after 1924, birth certificates could only say white or colored. And the effect truly was that, just as in the statement is mentioned, that people were erased. Their ancestry was erased. And tribes in Virginia have long struggled for both state and federal recognition. And when we talk about present day, those third graders that went on that field trip, they were alive when in Virginia, finally, Virginia tribes were finally recognized by the federal government. So Senator Kane was one of the legislators who proposed. It went outside the Bureau of Indian Affairs process. And the reason they had to was because this was one of the biggest obstacles to gaining federal recognition, was that ancestry couldn't be shown because it was only white or colored. The Supreme Court overturned that in 1967 with the Loving versus Virginia ruling. But 2017, President Trump signed that into law. And so now, I believe 6 tribes in Virginia are federally recognized, but many Native Americans lost their ability to trace their ancestry. And so those are the current day effects, right? And so the question still remains, though, if the historical accuracy of the statement isn't in question, is this appropriate for third graders? I spoke to the dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and because I'd read that over the last few years, that statement wasn't really read much at the Forbes Center. And what he explained to me was that there was a recent faculty decision that at Forbes Center performances, this would be read again. And that when that decision was made, there certainly was no conversation around, well, wait a second, we got some third graders coming. Right? And he said, if that had been part of the conversation, we would have said, well, this is intended for public performances. The staff member who was there was under the impression this is now mandatory. And so that's the conversation we had. At what age is it appropriate? Right? And I'll get to that again with a really good conversation around that. For third graders, it's not a standard to even know of Native American tribes in third grade. So in third grade, that statement, for the vast majority of kids, they don't know what's being read, right? They may hear the word white, they may hear Native American, but it's a complicated statement, right? And so there certainly can be that acknowledgement that once students are aware of it, or if there's work done, right, according to a standard. So for example, the new proposed social studies standards, at least in one of the versions, the struggle of Native Americans to gain federal recognition is Virginia Studies 4th grade, right? But unless there's that conversation, maybe too early before then. So that was not the intent, and that's how it was explained to me by the dean. In terms of the performance themes, so again, expectation that this may be a holiday performance. You certainly then don't expect what the performance was like. I don't know that even the current description of it does it really justice. The piece that's in question really is the second piece. So there were 2 short performances. The second one is called Sorrow. And so the explanation, again, I haven't had a chance to see it. I've seen an explanation of it. Sorrow means speak, in a language that's spoken in Nigeria. It is about people finding their voice. And so the themes that you heard about when Ms. Harold spoke last time, for example, of a Black dancer being pushed down, but then speaking up. Again, not exactly what you expect when you go to something where you expect where you had no information about what the performance is. Certainly, we all can interpret that in our own ways. The dancer probably interpreted it as racial bullying, but then overcoming that by speaking up. Others finding their voice, students finding their voice, bullying and all the other things. But what was missing was an expectation by the parents and by the families of what may actually be performed. Now, there was an email sent earlier to the schools saying, hey, the teachers should have a conversation with their students about what a modern dance performance is. But what those conversations in each classroom look like, I don't really know. So again, one element of traditional Nigerian dance, some kids, in at least what the teachers told me, they were giggling about them shaking their butts, right? Twerking is, of course, an interpretation that's sexualized based on more American dance over the last few years. So think Miley Cyrus maybe. But again, the teacher feedback. So 22 third grade teachers went to the performance. I sent a survey to all of them. There's always this idea that our teachers are afraid to speak up because they fear retaliation. And what I told the teachers was, one, that in my entire career in Rockingham County, I've never tried to trace where a particular submission came from. Email address wasn't required. And so I gave him some additional information. I said, if you want, this is anonymous. I trust you. I want your feedback. But if you still are afraid that somehow someone might trace timing and IP addresses, you don't have to be logged into Google to do this. Right? And if you are outside our network, and I gave those instructions, if you're outside our network, for us to trace a submission to a particular location and then tie that to someone's computer, we're talking court orders, and certainly we've neither the time nor the ability for something like this. Even if we were that despicable and tried to trace where something like that came from, we couldn't really do it. So you can remain anonymous. Out of the 22, 21 replied. So I asked them 5 questions. As a teacher, did any of the elements of the performance make you feel uncomfortable? As a teacher, do you feel that any of the elements were inappropriate for your students? Overall, was it a positive experience for you? Based on your observations or conversations, did any of the elements make your students feel uncomfortable? And overall, do you feel the trip to the Forbes Center was a positive experience for your students? So 2 teachers echoed Ms. Harold's sentiments, was exactly the same issues. Those 2 teachers said that they felt like the land acknowledgement statement was inappropriate. There's actually a 3rd teacher who otherwise said this was a great performance, who also said, that certainly caught my attention. One person said, that statement's probably not really for this age group, but everyone else said they didn't have, nothing made them feel uncomfortable. And then for the other questions, it was pretty much 19 out of, one person didn't answer the first question, and then it was 19 out of 21. So a positive experience for the teacher, 19 out of 21. A positive experience for the students, 19 out of 21. Again, the comments echoed, the 2 teachers that didn't like it were echoing the exact same statement. So not surprising, right? These aren't things where we get agreement across the board. 2 teachers actually approached me when I visited their schools and told me that they don't want to remain anonymous, right? They were in full support of the performance. To tell them, you're going to remain anonymous. We're not going through that. We've had a few cases where, again, then it takes on a life of its own. And so, but they explained why they felt it was a positive experience. However, 2 teachers did not. And again, I think when I look at overall what this is about, and I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talked about this, it was the lack of available information to make an informed decision about whether to come to that field trip and to take your grandson to the field trip. I think that's what it comes down to for the most part. And that students didn't understand that statement, right? It's not for their age group. And it, yeah. It's the last paragraph is a quote. The other 2, again, it's a longer statement. One of them is about native tribes. At least that's what I've received from Jamie. Mm-hmm.
LGBT community, white racism,
yeah.
white supremacy. Those were the words used in that.
So white supremacy is in the last paragraph. Certainly, again, Native Americans is in the first one. The only other, and again, because this wasn't a recorded statement, I asked Jamie for a copy of it. That's what they had sent me. The second one was about the slave trade and slaves. The statement that they had sent me, LGBTQ wasn't mentioned in their statement, but that was your recollection, right? Either way, though, you agreed that the statement isn't for 3rd graders, correct? Right. And so, and then also the 3rd one, that chaperones weren't able to go, and even though it was because of space constraints, it does, when you then have an issue, it does paint that in kind of an awkward way. Well, we tried to exclude parents because we knew they were going to do this to the kids. We talked about, projecting their voices versus, yelling at the kids. But again, it's perception based on what you expect at a performance. And so, again, Ms. Harold and I talked about this. Those are things that can all be taken care of. I talked to the dean about the Forbes Center statement. And again, and he acknowledged, not really for 3rd graders. And so from here on out, as we send students, the next performance, which is an orchestra performance, actually at Wilson Hall, One, it's not going to impact chaperones because I think they're seating for 1,300 people. Two, we will communicate with JMU, and he agreed to that, that this wouldn't be read for students unless, one, it's a topic that's been covered in class, and two, parents are aware of it. And third, that we will allow chaperones. Now, at the Forbes Center, it can get tricky, but given the numbers we had this time, if all students had attended, it would have been 440 just students. Ultimately, it was 350 students. So there may be a way to say, hey, all the students that want to go, once we have permission slips 4 or 5 days ahead of time, and say we have 60 open seats and we can bring 60 chaperones, right? So we don't necessarily want to exclude kids, but also, really the first part here, right? Provide parents with more detail about upcoming events. And again, that's a conversation I had in terms of what themes are approached in that. And I will say for the orchestra performance that's coming up in February, I've seen what's already been communicated, and it is much more detailed with an explanation of what that performance is, but also additional links with a wealth of information. So, we really appreciate JMU working with us, working with our students. We appreciate Any Given Child working with us and our students. These are performances that we've successfully brought students to for a number of years now. And I anticipate that we'll continue that, but there's also nothing wrong with saying for this particular performance, not having enough information certainly, made some attendees feel like, well, what's this? I thought this was going to be something different. And so more information is never a bad thing. Waiting with acknowledgement statements until kids are ready for that and have actually learned about it. Otherwise, it has either no meaning or they hear single words and certainly can upset them. And then again, revisiting the chaperone. So that would be the steps that we will take. And that should hopefully make sure that parents can make that informed decision, right, based on what I know. Either I give permission for my child to attend or not. If we ban it altogether, like some suggest, right, you get into the same thing because it affected one student or 50 students that the other 400, even if the parents would want them to see it, I can't see it. So more information is never a bad thing. And I think that's certainly something that we can support. Any questions related to this? Because I have one more item.
You said tonight that, first of all, I'm disappointed that I'm just now hearing about a lot of this information tonight with the public. You could have made this information available to the board and at least told us about what your findings were. And to that, I'm not happy about that. I hope in the next superintendent will do a better job in communicating with the school board of what the information they find out in investigations such as this. I also didn't need a history lesson from you tonight as well on what you said tonight. So the one thing that you pointed out tonight was that there were parents who said that when their kids got back, they were just really excited and everything about the play. But there were also teachers who said that when their kids got back from the play, that they were very somber, that there was things about them that didn't look the same. They wanted to ask what was wrong with the kids as well. So it's when you say a blanket comment that everyone was happy with this, it's not true. There was a lot of kids who came back like, what in the world did we just see there at the Forbes Center? My major thing that I have a complaint about is, number one, is that we should do a better job in knowing what our kids are going over to see at JMU. And so that needs to be something that needs to be done on our part, on overseeing what our children are going to be exposed to at these Forbes Center where they go when they go. So we need to know beforehand, what are they going to see? What's going to be in there? And when you talk about twerking, that was something that was first happened over in Africa, I believe it was. And so it's not something that we're used to here in America, and the fact that it's something that we're here in the Valley that we're teaching our kids that it's appropriate to twerk or to shake like that in a play. So that was kind of downplayed as well. So I think there needs to be more oversight from our side of what our kids are going over there to see on this.
Yep. So 19 of 21 isn't everyone. So as I said, 19 teachers felt it was a good experience for the kids. 2 teachers did not. So again, I said across the board of these questions, it was 2 teachers who had the concerns and 19 who didn't. As I said, what the steps would be, certainly, again, we need to be aware of what's going to be performed. So requesting that more details about upcoming events is provided. So I think what you just asked for is exactly what we also said we would ask of JMU, and they've agreed that they would provide that. And again, we'll share the details of the February performance that will be at Wilson Hall. And certainly there's a lot more information than what we had previously.
Well, and that's great. And the second thing that really bothers me, and I can share this when it's my turn to speak, though, is that the whole white repentance acknowledgement statement from the Forbes Center is something that I don't want our kids being subjected to when they go over there. So I'm recommending that the board tonight would not allow our students in Rockingham County to be subjected to that at the Forbes Center, and that they would take out the white supremacy and the other things. I got the whole list because you presented a different list of what I've seen as well. And so I don't believe that we need to subject our kids, whether they're 3rd graders or 12th graders, to making them feel like they have some part in this oppression that we've seen in our nation's history. So that's a big deal for me as a school board member, sending our kids over there. And it's a deal breaker for me that if we as board members are going to subject our kids to that, if they want to do that at JMU, that's their on whatever they want to do. But at Rockingham County Public Schools, as parents, majority of us do not want our kids subjected to that message when they attend a play. So we know beforehand what it is, and if that's the case and the board wants to know that, it would be great to know that on the permission slip sent home that this message is going to be read to your kids before the performance starts. Right. And so that's a big deal. That's a huge deal with me.
As I said, there would be 2 conditions. One, that it's something that students have learned about, and secondly, that it would be shared with the community, both the statement itself and the historical context, so parents can make an informed decision. But I'm not in favor of not allowing students whose families want them to see a performance to be excluded from it because someone else doesn't like the land acknowledgement statement. Which brings me to my other topic, again, related to how we approach themes that our teachers have to deal with all the time, right? So we've talked about this before, teachers selecting educational materials. So we have a policy. Obviously, the board selects textbooks, but RCPS policy does delegate the responsibility for the selection and use of supplemental materials to the individual schools. Teachers must carefully review materials prior to use and exercise a high degree of professional judgment in their selection and use of supplemental materials. So those would be materials used for classroom assignments, to ensure that the use of such materials serves to both support and complement the basic educational objectives within the specific subject areas and classrooms. And it is just like the conversation around performances, who makes the decision about selection materials, and what sites or what organizations we simply want to ban because they offend the sensibilities of part of the community. And so the school board has delegated that to the schools selection, but with, again, high degree of professional judgment. Those teachers know their students, they know the subject matter, and they know what good materials are. So we had this conversation about the C3 Teachers Hub. There's been a suggestion that we ban that because we find inquiries on the C3 Hub that we don't think are appropriate for Rockingham County schools.
That have been deemed inherently divisive by the Youngkin administration.
You'll get your chance to ask questions at the end. Provides inquiries that follow the IDM model, And teachers can select inquiries based on whether an inquiry is appropriate for their classrooms. The C3 organizations endorsed by the National Council of Social Studies. So again, these are people that understand the subject matter very well. And it's clear that not every inquiry that's posted to the C3 Teacher Hub is appropriate for every classroom. And so there certainly are going to be inquiries that will not work in Rockingham County schools, but there are others that do. And if teachers exercise their high degree of professional judgment, then if we ban entire resources, then we will deprive them of the opportunity to find good ones. So for example, we talked about, Governor Youngkin talked about teaching the good and the bad of history. We need to teach all of it, and not just because it fits our personal beliefs. And so the concern that's been raised previously, Mr. Cross made that concern known as well at the 2nd November board meeting, that if we point out that the framers were maybe flawed in some ways, that now the next step is we'll tear down the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And I just, as a former history student and social studies teacher, I just have never found that to be an issue with any of my students. The Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution are incredible historical documents that accomplish things that many European constitutions couldn't accomplish, despite being dozens of pages long, putting every detail about how government should operate into a constitution. And then yet you saw constitutions fail very quickly in many countries. And the strength of the US Constitution is it's a couple pages and accounts for a society today just with a couple dozen amendments that is completely different from what the world was like in, back in 1776 with the Declaration, and then 1780s for the Constitution. So we can celebrate the document. It doesn't mean that we can't talk about the things that were in those documents that today we would say, really, we would like to see better, right? And people at the time said that, right? So when we talk about all men are created equal, right? Abigail Adams wrote a letter to John Adams in Boston and said, hey, now that you've declared your independence, don't forget about women, right? You guys are creating a government, and we don't want to see the same dictatorial approach where women have no say. Well, that's not how it ended up, right? It took until 1920 for women to have the right to vote. And again, our lifetime, 1974 until 1974, unmarried women, even if they had a job, oftentimes couldn't get credit because they were women. That's it, right? And so we can celebrate both, that this is an incredible historical document, but also that it, number one, the process for amending it was there. That can be celebrated, right? And that over time, it was able to account for these things, but we can't pretend that everyone back then agreed with that. Women didn't agree that they would have a no right to vote, right? So, it's 1974 Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Finally, women were treated the same when it came to credit opportunity. 3/5 compromise, right? That the document itself, so Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution said, when we talk about how many representatives each state has, we'll count the regular population, including indentured servants. So people that, sometimes people say, oh, but what about the white slaves? They refer to indentured servants, treated differently in the Constitution. Slaves count as 60% of a person. Now, of course, no right to vote, their property, but we at least want to give the states that had slaves 60% of a person's count when it comes to how many seats they had in Congress. That's in the Constitution, right? Now, was eliminated, but interracial marriage in Virginia wasn't allowed until 1967. I was alive then, right? So these are things that affected communities for centuries. And these things didn't change until our lifetime. But it doesn't mean, as we're oftentimes accused, that we only talk about, the bad things that happen to minority populations. First of all, women are, I believe, the majority in the country, but also we talk about many, many other topics. Indentured servants. Often it's like, oh, it's all about the transatlantic slave trade. We don't talk about those people who, came from Europe and then had to basically were obligated to work until their debt was paid off, but could never pay it off. So in fact, were beholden to someone to work. It's one of the history standards, right? Indentured servitude. But then we also talk about, for example, poor white populations, in the Shenandoah what's now the Shenandoah National Park. We do want to talk about all of it, how these aspirational documents created a framework for a country to have a continuous democracy longer than any other country around, right? But at the same time, that people have flaws, and we can acknowledge that, and how far the country's come, and that there's still ways to go, right? And so that's what that's about. In fact, we have an entire class at East Rock about how creating the Shenandoah National Park affected students, even their families in the Elkton area, when people were simply pushed out of the mountains. So we don't have a singular focus. We talk about what happened to people, and over time, history was about those who made decisions. And oftentimes the people that were left out were the ones who had no power, whether they had to own property to vote, whether they, whatever it was. So these are conversations that aren't always easy, but, even the later version now that's going to go to the Board of Education from the Department of Education, their history standards, they've added significant elements of that, what we call hard history. It is what it is. That doesn't mean we're going to go into a class and split the kids and say, oh, white, that means oppressor. That's not appropriate. And we've talked about that. That's not what we're about, but all history needs to be acknowledged. And oftentimes that was erased from the history books. And so, again, when we talk about a supplemental materials policy that gives teachers the right to make solid professional decisions versus banning resources, right? We've talked at length about the Virginia Inquiry Collaborative. No one was made to attend. It was a professional, well, one person, social studies supervisor. If the social studies supervisor didn't participate, then teachers couldn't attend for free. But teachers had a choice to participate. And then they created resources for use. And if you ever want to see an example of that policy in action, where teachers used their significant professional judgment to decide what works in Rockingham County schools, the outcome of that World History Inquiry year where we participated shows that, right? The efforts of the Kurdish population to gain independence, the role of women in South and Central American politics. And it also gives our teachers a chance to share with others. Does everything that comes out of a professional development activity then have to end up in Rockingham County schools? No, it doesn't. Okay. Just to clear this, finally, again, in November, I was accused of having lied about two things. One, that we were only part of it for a year. Two, that we were part of it from the beginning. I did receive an apology about the year, but just if you want to know whether we were part of it from the beginning. So this is a slide from March 2020. Virginia Inquiry Collaborative included a number of activities, I believe, over in Charlottesville. Here are the 4 school divisions. You will find Rockingham County to be absent, and we weren't part of it from the beginning. So I want to be on the record there, not because of stuff that's on Facebook, but because it was said in public meeting. And so when we start banning activities, we can't be part of the VIC. This is what we lose out on. This is what we lose out on. Our ability to attend professional development opportunities that involve social studies teachers from across the state, from the participating school divisions. And we lose out on work with organizations who find the Virginia Inquiry Collaborative and the Inquiry Design Model and the work that was done at those meetings valuable, because they both fund the effort and they participated. So the sessions we attended were also attended and obviously endorsed as valuable by organizations such as, so we're not talking about people who want to tear down our understanding of history. The Smithsonian, United States History Museum had representatives there, and the Smithsonian. National Museum of American History. Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. James Madison's Montpelier. In fact, they funded part of it. Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, the National Portrait Gallery, the American Civil War Museum, the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. If you ever want to talk about an organization connected to a president that's significantly funded with conservative money, George Washington's Mount Vernon. Those are organizations that were part of the VIC. And rather than saying, I don't trust our teachers and they can't come up with activities that work here, we have the evidence that they do. And if these people are at the table and are saying this is a good effort, then I certainly will support it. So had we been part of it the year before, and these organizations are part of it, it would have also justified being part of it then. The reason we talked about 1 year was because it was a question about CRT, and I said the topic was world history. CRT is about the American legal system and its impact, and whether it creates a racist structure or negative outcomes for minorities, and as I said, it couldn't have been part of that conversation because it's not a world history topic, right? That doesn't mean that when the topic is US history and the Smithsonian and Mount Vernon and Monticello and Williamsburg are part of it, that I wouldn't also have supported it. Our teachers make good decisions, and I do want them to know that they have my support to make good professional decisions, and all the evidence is there that they do. But this is who we would have missed out on. So that's who we're trying to ban. Thank you.
Excuse me, please be seated. Okay, we're just going to move on. Thank you. Next on the agenda are policy revisions. I believe we have Marcy Williams to talk about policy revisions. Thank you very much. Marcy.
Thank you. Tonight I'm here to talk to you about two policies. The first one is policy DAA, and it's the Uniform Grant Guidance for Federal Grants. The addition that you see there is related to the Davis-Bacon Act and talks about minimum wages for those employees that are on those sites for federally funded projects. That's the only addition there. And then the second policy you see for your information is JED, and it's about attendance. In this policy, there are several changes throughout it. We did define what distance learning present means. It's a code that we've had now since back when we were doing all of our learning online. And we also outlined in this policy where we might use that now. On page 2 is the definition of the policy. On page 3 and 4, we removed some of the language in this policy that no longer applies, like after-school detention and Saturday school as consequences for truancy acts, because that's not something that our schools are currently offering. On page 4, you'll see we added a piece there about infectious diseases and viruses and when we require students to quarantine. That might be a place where we would use the distance learning present code. So we added that to our policy. And then last, family vacation may be another option where administrators would give approval for some distance learning present code and allow students to learn online. Those are the two policies that we have for your information tonight. And are there any questions for me at this time?
Board members, do we have any questions? And I'm going to remind board members, if you come up with questions, feel free to contact Marcy before the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Board members, you will find in your packets the financial review and the attendance reports for December. So there they are. We're going to move on to board members' questions. And I'm going to start with, I think I'm going to start with Mr. Cross. Mr. Cross?
I figured you'd start with me, so this is, no, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. Thanks for your sign, very mature. I don't even know where to go tonight after hearing a lot that was discussed tonight with our superintendent and his rebuttal of the Virginia Inquiry Collaborative as well. I've laid it out over a year and a half of investigating our involvement with the VIC And it was more than us just attending a conference in which you made the public seem to be that's what we did. And that was not the truth. It was 6 school divisions that came together. And not only that, but through the FOIAs I ran, and I'll read one of them tonight, although I wasn't prepared to read this tonight because you hid this from board members, especially myself, that you were going to address the VIC and other things you did tonight. So, but I could pull this back up here on my phone. So just give me a second. So when we were in it, one of the emails that we received from John Hobson, and I talked all about who John Hobson is and how we were involved with his involvement with our history supervisor, Mr. Dickinson, and their involvement with the VSSLC and their involvement in that group attacking the Youngkin administration when it comes to their history provisions and all that they do. They're a lobbying educational for curriculum. They lobby curriculum in Richmond. So this is one of the emails that John sent out to all those who were involved in the VIC on the October 20th of 2020. And Dr. Scheichel's in there and other central office employees as well, along with our history supervisor. And this is troubling because in the email it says, we just wanted to follow up on our first session and say how heartened we are to be around so many educators committed to teaching for equity and justice. And this was interesting, particularly while the winds are swirling. This was, think back in 2020, all that was happening, all the BLM riots, everything that was going on. And this is a anti-racist, anti-hatred, anti-bigotry curriculum that the VIC came together to write to enhance or to better write Virginia histories, because apparently we were all taught racist history growing up, even myself that graduated from Spotswood in 1998. So thanks for that lesson again tonight as well. But this is one of the things that was very troubling about that was the homework that you subjected our teachers to here in Rockingham County. And the history and the homework was from Dr. Dorinda Carter on her TED Talk on white supremacy and all kinds of other things like that. So these are the ideology of which the group was going around. Also, the Youngkin administration found the group that we were a part of as well to have written divisive material that through his executive order, I believe number 2, that got rid of. So the VIC, I'm not going to go down that whole thing. It was not good for Rockingham County Public Schools. Thank God that we have an election coming up this coming year in November, and I believe that this board is going to better reflect the residents of Rockingham County, and we also have a new superintendent that's coming on. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that we're not going to be a part going forward in Rockingham County and subjecting our teachers and our students to this kind of curriculum. So the VIC, it is what it is. I've told you from day one that I didn't believe that we should have been a part of that. And we can agree to disagree, but I'm telling you that we should have never, ever been a part of that. So the second thing that I wanted to bring up tonight was that, and I said it earlier, was the fact that the white repentance message that the Forbes Center reads off before our students go to is inappropriate. And so I want to take time tonight to read what they listed on the news report as well. So they say, we invite you, this is what is read, this is what I believe was possibly read to our students that night, seeing that there's a couple of these out there that I guess that could have been read, but it's not, Dr. Scheichel, it is not, the people in Rockingham County are not upset that we teach the hard history facts of Virginia or the United States of America. It has nothing to do with, thank you. Thank you, and this is someone that's part of the community dialogue group that was picked before other people that were picked over as well. So a very mature pick there on the community dialogue. But it has nothing to do with teaching the hard facts or the hard history. We want to know that. We want the kids to know that. It has nothing to do about that. It has to do when we subject our kids to this kind of material that we find not to be the truth. And so I want to read this tonight. It says, this is what JMU at the Forbes Center, this is one of the statements in which they read out to our children, whether they're third graders or 12th graders. I don't want to subject them to it. And so it says, we invite you to recognize the written histories of the Shenandoah Valley, the city of Harrisonburg, and our university's namesake, James Madison, as fractured. As fractured. So we're a fractured, number one, we're a fractured community by our Harrisonburg City, Shenandoah Valley, and that James Madison also is a fractured person as well. And we'll get into the demonization of our founding fathers with statements like this as well. So then it goes on to say, let us acknowledge, this is the land acknowledgement. Let's acknowledge then that we are currently on the land of the indigenous Siouan, Algonquian, and Haudenosaunee, if I got that right, communities who lived here for many generations, who continue to be systematically erased by policies and practices that remove their histories from this place. Then it goes in and say, let us honor the enslaved people who built the wealth and foundation of James Madison. Then it goes on to say, this is a part that really, that we have a problem with, is that you ignored tonight, really. It's not the fact of teaching hard history. We want that, okay? We want, the parents of Rockingham County, we're not racist and we're not behind the times where we don't want that taught. We want that all taught. But this is the part that we agree with, is when it says, let us recognize the histories of Virginia and the United States as complicit with the racism of white supremacy. I'm sorry, you don't get to judge that. You don't get to subject our children to those kind of statements and make them feel like the white children that are there that are oppressors, and the colored kids that are the kids of color that are there, that they are victims. I'm sorry, we don't get a chance to do that. We recognize that these difficult histories persist in present-day racial realities and privileges at this university. Well, if JMU's got such a big problem on racism, we probably shouldn't be sending our kids there. If they've got a big problem on racism, we should consider our partnership with JMU, because it sounds like they've got a lot of white repentance that they're doing at JMU lately. We commit to dismantling racism in spaces of our work. We invite you to work beside us to create change. And that was the main purpose of the VIC in teaching its lessons, that the children would be civically active. And when they showed that, John Hobson shows that clip on NBC 29, he shows 4 clips of children going out and protesting on street corners, at courts, and doing all kinds of stuff civically engaged. And the majority of parents do not want their children to grow up to go out and to protest and act like this. Some of them may do, that's fine. But that was the main goal of the purpose that John Hobson says, that was the main purpose of the VIC. I'm sorry, that's not what we want to be a part of here in Rockingham County. So this is just another step in demonizing our founding fathers, because we believe that we are a morally better people than what they were at their time. We believe that we in this generation are a morally better people than what our founding fathers were. And one day we will all be judged by that. So are we morally better than what they were? I don't know. When we have aborted 63 million babies in the womb since 1973, are we morally better than them? When we ripped the brains out of children from within the womb, and we have a governor like Governor Northam that talked about having a child birth on the birthing table, then having a discussion with the parent whether they want to keep the child or not. Are we morally better of people that enslave people? But it seems like we have a self-righteous attitude in our generation that we think that we're morally better than what the founding fathers were. Over 500,000 soldiers and the Union soldiers that are in the Civil War gave their lives to free the slaves. They put within our Constitution, they put within the framework of our founding the ability for all men to be free in the United States, and thank God that they did that. Is slavery wrong? I absolutely agree that slavery was wrong. They'll be judged for owning slaves. But when we think that we're morally a better people, we're performing child sex surgeries to thousands of children in the United States. The last I heard, there are 3 hospitals within the United States that will do a child sex change on children. Is that morally? Is that good? I don't think it is. In Los Angeles, children can leave school without parent permission. They can visit a doctor without parent permission. They can be prescribed hormone blockers without parent permission. Are we morally better? In September of 2022, the world's youngest transgender model walked down the runway in New York City, 10 years old. Noella McMayer was her name. Noella is reported to have known her gender when she was 2 years old. Are we morally a better society? Time will tell. Time will tell. So when we go down this wokeism, this is what we're doing when we're sending our kids over to JMU, to the Forbes Center, to have this read to them. As we go through this wokeism generation that we're going through. So you want definition of wokeism? I hear that's been very popular. Want to know what the definition of woke is. Here's the best the definition I could find of being woke. Taking on the worldview of critical social justice, which sees the world only in terms of unjust power dynamics and the need to dismantle problematic systems. So when they say within their statement at JMU, when they use the word white supremacy, they're not talking about the KKK and skinheads and Nazism and all that kind of stuff. They're not talking about that. This is what they're talking about when they talk about white supremacy. They're talking about white supremacy as a historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of color by white peoples and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. That's what they're saying. And so that's why I have a problem with us subjecting our kids to statements on white supremacy and at JMU, when I thought that Virginia wasn't subjecting their children to any critical race theory ideologies in K through 12. I thought that was the big deal at the beginning of the year. We wasn't subjecting our kids to that. We are at the Forbes Center at the very beginning. So tonight, I'd like to see the board move, and I know you won't, but I would still like to say it. But I would like to see the board move to where we do not allow our students to go over to JMU and be subjected to this kind of statements on them. That if we're going to send I'm not against going to any given child and letting them see plays that we've reviewed and that are okay. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not saying ban all plays going over at the Forbes Center. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I do not believe it's right to subject our kids to the acknowledgement statement that JMU provides at the Forbes Center. That's what I'm saying. And I'm also saying that I would like to have a better oversight from the Rockham County Public Schools in what we are subjecting the kids and seeing when they go. And it is age appropriate. It was not age appropriate for what the third graders saw. And I think you admitted that tonight as well, that the main subject of this was that it wasn't age appropriate. And what they saw at the performance was not age appropriate. But then it leads down to the bigger one that I'm saying tonight, is that I believe we need to take a stance as a community and as a board, saying that if you want to continue reading that acknowledgement statement at the very beginning, then we will withhold our children from going over there and being subjected to that. So that's what I would like to present to the board tonight as well. I can make a motion to do that so we can have everyone on on record tonight on where we stand on that. But I think that it's something that we could make as a school board, that we could make a judgment, and we could tell the superintendent that, listen, our kids are not going to be subjected to that anymore when they go over to the Forbes Center. And if that's what they want to subject upon our kids, then our kids will not be going. And that should be the message that every single one of us board members here in Rockingham County should be sending to the superintendent of Rockingham County Public Schools.
I'm going to interrupt here.
Okay.
Dr. Scheichel, when is the next planned trip to the Forbes Center?
The next performance by the Forbes Center is at the end of February or late, I think it's 17th maybe. Yep. And that's a concert performance at Wilson Hall. So it's not at the actual Forbes Center building. The next one at the Forbes Center, I believe, is at the end of March.
Okay, thank you. So we would have time at we could make this an action item for another meeting.
Absolutely.
We don't
I
have
would,
anything.
if that's what it's going to take to make it an action item to vote on this, then absolutely. If anything, I'd love for the community to see where we all stand and board members of what we're subjecting our kids to when we send them over to the Forbes Center at the very beginning of reading this acknowledgement statement that many of us do not agree with. And so, yes, Ms. Laura, that would be great if we can make that an action item even I mean, it could be in the following meeting. It could be an action item in the next meeting. It doesn't have to be something that had to take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to do. It can be done next meeting. It could be done this meeting if we wanted to.
Well, you've both certainly given us a lot to think about and talk about between now and the next meeting. So thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Falk? Thank you. Dr. McQuilkin? Mr. Breeden?
I think the one thing I can agree with Mr. Cross on tonight is I don't know where to go with that. I suppose if I'd have been in church, I would have turned my JMU alumni shirt inside out. I don't know. Let me just say, though, that if you've not had an opportunity, fellow members of the board, to see the movie Inherit the Wind, which was made in 1960, starred Spencer Tracy and Frederick March. And it dealt with some of the same kind of issues that we're talking about here tonight as it related to, at that time, a state making it illegal to teach Darwinism in public schools and banning different activities. And there's a scene in there where Spencer Tracy's character says, and I'm quoting from the film, "I say that you cannot administer a wicked law impartially. You can only destroy. You can only punish. And I warn you that a wicked law like cholera destroys everyone it touches, its upholders as well as its defilers. Can't you understand," he goes on to say, "that if you take a law like evolution and make it a crime to teach it in the public schools, tomorrow you may make it a crime to teach it in the private schools, and tomorrow you might make it a crime to read about it, and soon you may ban books and newspapers, and then you may turn Catholic against Protestant and Protestant against Protestant, and try foist your own religion upon the mind of man. If you can do one, you can do the other. Because fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy and needs feeding. Your Honor, soon with banners flying and drums beating, we will be marching backward to the glorious ages of that 16th century when bigots burned the man who dared bring enlightenment and intelligence to the human mind." End of quote. Now, before anyone says here tonight that I'm advocating Darwinism, let me be clear. My faith tells me that the one thing that separates our species from lower species is that God has given us the ability to think and to reason and to make decisions. And as for me, my faith is strong enough that I'm not afraid to hear opposing ideas. My relationship with my kids and my grandkids is such that I'm not afraid to discuss counter-opposing views. So don't misunderstand or misquote what I'm saying. But I will go back to that statement that I made earlier that rung so clear to me from a previous superintendent, and that is, be ye careful.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Do we have any students left in the house? We do normally recognize government students that are here, and I think we had a couple. I think we've got a couple that are like, please don't call on me. But I just want to recognize that we have students that are probably here because of government. And I think there's maybe a younger one or two in the crowd. And I just want to welcome them and thank them for their patience with us tonight. And congratulate you guys on seeing government in action. We wish you luck in the coming school year. And thank you guys for attending tonight. Dr. Scheichel, do you have anything?
I'll just keep it brief. VSSLC, it follows the same pattern. We attack it. There are social studies standards that are proposed or recently endorsed by the Virginia Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development and by the American Historical Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have reason to enter closed session. Do I have a motion? Somebody want to read it? Somebody other than me for a change?
All right, Mrs. Lohr, I move that the board enter a closed meeting for the purpose to discuss or consider the following pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711. A1, personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individuals' assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there any discussion? Before we vote, I'd like to thank everyone for being patient and quiet and respectful tonight. Have a safe journey home. All those in favor of entering closed session, please say aye. All those opposed, same sign. We're in closed session. Thank you all very much. I'm trying. I know. It'll be good.
Thank you so very much. You all have a blessed evening. Thanks,
Got a
sir.
nice box.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing with that. Cheryl. Sure. You did a lot of rainwork tonight.
Yeah.